The blood on Zachary Trent's knuckles had dried to rust by the time he stumbled into the cookhouse yard that October evening in 1878, the last pale thread of sun barely holding above the mesquite line west of the ranch. And he expected nothing except maybe a tin cup of cold beans if the crew had left any. But there on the windowsill sat a covered plate that still breathed heat into the cooling air. He stopped beside the water trough, exhausted enough that his vision swam, and stared at that cloth-wrapped shape as though it might vanish if he blinked. The cattle drive from the northern pastures had stretched to 3 days, instead of 1 because a cougar had spooked the herd, and they'd scattered across 15 miles of brush country. And he'd been in the saddle so long his legs barely remembered how to hold his weight. But someone had saved him supper. Zachary lifted the cloth. Beefsteak, beans with bacon, cornbread still faintly warm. His stomach clenched. He ate standing there in the dusk, too tired to make it to the bunkhouse, each bite tasting better than anything he could remember. When he finished, he folded the cloth carefully and left the clean plate on the sill, then walked to the bunkhouse where 8 other ranch hands were already snoring in their bunks. "You find that plate again?" Tom Ferris asked from the shadows, not asleep after all. "Yeah. That is the 3rd time this month. The cook's daughter has taken a shine to you, Trent." Zachary said nothing. He pulled off his boots and lay down on his bunk, still wearing his shirt and trousers, too exhausted to care. But as he drifted toward sleep, he thought about that warm plate, and something in his chest pulled tight with an emotion he had no name for. Her name was Zara Ashford, and she had arrived at the ranch 6 weeks earlier when her father was hired as the new cook after old Miguel retired. She was 19, dark-haired, quick with her hands, and she never met anyone's eyes for long. Zachary was 24 and had been working cattle since he was 15, first in South Texas, and then here on the Double J Ranch outside San Antonio when the owner needed men who could handle the long drives north to the Kansas railheads. He had learned young that words were wasted effort, that you proved yourself through work, through showing up, through doing what needed doing without complaint. So he never asked Zara why she saved him supper on the nights when the drives ran late, and she never offered an explanation. The plate was simply there, warm under its cloth, and he ate it and left it clean and the next morning went back to work. But the other men noticed. "You going to marry that girl or just let her feed you like a stray dog?" Tom asked one morning while they were saddling horses before dawn. "Leave it alone," Zachary said. "I am just saying a woman does not keep a man's supper warm unless she is thinking about keeping him warm too." Tom grinned. "You could do worse. She is pretty and she can cook, and her daddy is not the type to chase you off with a shotgun." Zachary tightened his saddle cinch and swung up onto his horse without answering. He did not know what to say about Zara Ashford, did not know how to put into words the way his chest went tight when he saw her hanging laundry in the yard or kneading bread dough in the cookhouse with flour dusting her forearms. He was not good with words. He never had been. His father had been a hard man who spoke mostly with his fists, and his mother had died when Zachary was 12, and he'd left home at 15 with nothing but a horse and a saddle, and the ability to work until his body gave out. Talking about feelings seemed like something other men did, softer men, men who had not learned that the world respected action over sentiment. But he thought about her. Lord, he thought about her. The ranch ran 2,000 head of cattle across 30,000 acres of Texas grassland and brush, and the work never stopped. Calving season, branding, mending fences, breaking horses, driving stock to new pasture, and twice a year the long push north to the railheads where the cattle were sold and shipped east. Zachary was good at the work. He could rope and brand and break a horse that nobody else could touch, and he could go longer on less sleep than any man on the ranch. The owner, James Johnston, paid him $30 a month plus room and board, and Zachary saved almost every penny because he had some vague idea that someday he might buy his own land, his own herd, though the dream felt distant as the moon. It was late November when he saw Zara in the yard one evening, taking down laundry as the sun dropped, and he made himself walk over to her even though his heart hammered against his ribs. "Thank you," he said, "for the suppers." She looked at him, her hands full of folded sheets and her face colored. "You work hard. You should eat. You do not have to, I know." She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "But I want to." He stood there feeling like a fool, his hat in his hands, searching for something else to say. Finally he managed, "It means a lot. The food, it is good. I am glad." Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "You look so tired when you come in late. I thought maybe it would help." "It does." They stood in the fading light, the laundry basket between them, and Zachary felt the words piling up in his throat but could not force them out. He wanted to tell her that her kindness was the best part of his day, that he rode harder on those long drives just thinking about coming back to her warm supper, that he lay awake at night remembering the way she smiled at him across the yard. But the words would not come. So he just nodded and put his hat back on and walked away, cursing himself for a coward. Winter settled in, though Texas winters were mild compared to the northern plains. The work continued. Zachary spent his days in the saddle, moving cattle to winter pasture, mending fences damaged by storms, breaking the string of young horses James Johnston had bought from a mustanger. The days were short and cold, and the nights were long, and every time he came back late from some task, there was a warm plate waiting on the cookhouse windowsill. He started leaving small things for Zara in return. A handful of wildflowers when he found them blooming in a sheltered draw. A smooth river stone he'd picked up by the creek. Once, a perfectly shed snakeskin, papery and intact, because he'd heard her tell another woman she thought such things were beautiful. He never said anything about the gifts, just left them on the windowsill beside his clean plate, and she never mentioned them either. But he noticed that she wore one of the flowers in her hair the next day, dried and pinned beside her braid. Tom Ferris shook his head. "You two are the strangest courtship I have ever seen. You know you could just talk to her. We talk. No, you grunt and she whispers and you both turn red and run away. That is not talking." Zachary scowled at him. "Mind your business." But Tom was right, and Zachary knew it. He was 24 years old, and he had never courted a woman properly. Never learned how. The few women he'd known before had been saloon girls in trail towns, transactions that left him feeling empty and ashamed. Zara was different. Zara was good and kind, and she deserved better than a man who could barely string 3 words together. But every evening when he found that warm plate waiting, hope kindled in his chest despite his doubts. December passed into January of 1879. The ranch prepared for the spring cattle drive, the big push that would take 300 head north to Dodge City, over 800 miles of prairie and river crossings, and possible Indian trouble. Zachary would be part of the crew, gone for 2 months at least, maybe longer. The thought of leaving Zara for that long made his chest ache, but the drive was part of the work, part of the life he'd chosen. James Johnston was paying drive wages, $40 a month instead of $30, and Zachary needed the money if he was ever going to build something of his own. The night before the drive was set to start, Zara found him in the barn where he was checking his tack and supplies. She stood in the doorway with the lamplight behind her, making a silhouette of her slender frame. "You are leaving tomorrow," she said. "Yes." For how long? 2 months, maybe more. Depends on the trail, the weather, the cattle. She stepped into the barn, her hands clasped in front of her. Will you be careful? Always am. I am serious, Zachary. I hear the men talk. There are rustlers on the trail and storms and rivers that can drown a man. He set down the bridle he'd been oiling and turned to face her fully. I will be careful. Promise me. I promise. She moved closer, and in the lamplight he could see her eyes shining. I will keep your supper warm every night, even if you are not here to eat it. Something in his chest cracked open. Zara, I mean it. I will save you a plate every single night until you come back. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides and took her hands in his calloused fingers swallowing her smaller ones. Why? Why what? Why do you do it? The suppers, the waiting, all of it. I am nobody. Just a ranch hand with nothing to my name. Her eyes flashed. You are not nobody. You are the hardest working man on this ranch, and you are kind even though you try to hide it, and you are the only person who ever notices when I am tired or sad or lonely. You are lonely. Of course I am lonely. Her voice broke slightly. We moved here from East Texas after my mother died, and I do not know anyone, and my father works all day in the cookhouse, and the only time I feel like I matter is when I see you eat the food I saved for you, and I know that I did something good for someone who deserves good things. Zachary felt like he'd been kicked in the chest by a horse. You matter. Do I? Yes. He squeezed her hands. You matter to me, more than I know how to say. Then say it anyway. He swallowed hard, fighting with words that felt clumsy and insufficient. I think about you all the time. When I am out on the range, when I am riding drag behind the herd eating dust, when I am so tired I can barely stay in the saddle. I think about coming back here and seeing you, and eating the supper you saved, and hoping maybe you saved it because you care about me the way I care about you. I do care about you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I care about you so much it frightens me. He pulled her against his chest and held her, his chin resting on top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair that smelled like wood smoke and bread and something sweet he could not name. She wrapped her arms around his waist and clung to him, and they stood that way for a long time while the horses shifted in their stalls and the lamp burned low. I will come back, he said finally. I swear to you I will come back. You better, she said against his shirt. Because I am going to wait for you, Zachary Trent, and if you make me wait forever I will never forgive you. He smiled despite himself. 2 months, 3 at most. I will count every day. He tilted her face up and kissed her, his first kiss, awkward and tentative but full of everything he could not say. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, and when they finally pulled apart they were both breathing hard. That was a promise, he said. Good, she whispered. Because I am holding you to it. The drive started at dawn. 15 men, 300 head of cattle, 2 chuck wagons, and 800 miles of trail stretching north through Texas, Indian Territory, and into Kansas. Zachary rode point most days, guiding the herd, eating dust and fighting ornery steers and sleeping on the ground with his saddle for a pillow. The days blurred together into a rhythm of movement and exhaustion. They crossed the Red River into Indian Territory, paid the Chickasaw toll, pushed through tall grass prairie where the cattle spread out and grazed as they walked. They forded swollen creeks, outran one tornado, and fought off a pack of wolves that tried to take a calf one night. Every evening, as he lay in his bedroll staring up at the stars, Zachary thought about Zara. He pictured her in the cookhouse, preparing supper for the ranch hands who'd stayed behind, setting aside a plate for him even though he was 500 miles away. The image comforted him and pained him at the same time. He missed her with an intensity that surprised him, missed her quiet presence and her shy smile, and the way she looked at him like he was worth something. "You are thinking about that girl again," Tom said one night, spreading his bedroll beside Zachary's. "Maybe. You got it bad, Trent." "Maybe," Tom laughed. "When we get back, you should marry her. You are not getting any younger, and a woman like that will not wait forever." She said she would wait. "Then you are a lucky man. Most women would not put up with a cowboy who is gone half the year chasing cattle across the plains." Zachary stared up at the river of stars. "I am thinking maybe this is my last drive." "What?" "I have been saving money. I have almost $300 now. After this drive, maybe I will have close to 400. That is enough to buy some land, start a small herd, maybe build a house." Tom whistled low. "You are serious about her?" "Yeah." "Well, I will be damned." Zachary Trent settling down. "I never thought I would see the day." "Neither did I," Zachary admitted. "But I want to build something that lasts, something that is mine. I am tired of wandering." "Then do it, friend. Life is too short to spend it alone." They reached Dodge City in late March, thin and filthy and exhausted, and sold the cattle for a good price. James Johnston was pleased and paid them their wages in full plus a bonus. Zachary tucked his money carefully into his belt and prepared for the ride home. But on the second day of the return journey, everything went wrong. They were passing through Indian Territory, just south of the Kansas border, when the rustlers hit them. 6 men on fast horses, masked and armed, they came out of a ravine at sunset and opened fire. The ranch crew scattered. Zachary was riding drag, bringing up the rear with the remuda of extra horses, when a bullet caught him in the left shoulder and knocked him out of his saddle. He hit the ground hard, the wind slamming out of his lungs, and his horse bolted. Around him men were shouting, guns firing, horses screaming. He tried to get up, but his left arm would not work right, and blood was soaking his shirt, and the world tilted sideways. Tom Ferris appeared beside him, firing his pistol at the rustlers, and then someone was dragging Zachary behind a fallen cottonwood tree. The gunfight lasted maybe 5 minutes, though it felt like hours. When the rustlers finally rode off with a dozen horses from the remuda, 3 ranch hands were wounded and 1 was dead. Zachary was the worst hurt besides the dead man, and the pain in his shoulder was like a hot iron pressed into his flesh. "We need to get you to a doctor," Tom said, wrapping a bandana around the wound to slow the bleeding. "How far to the nearest town?" "Too far. We are 2 days from anything." James Johnston, who had led the drive, knelt beside Zachary and examined the wound. The bullet went clean through. "That is good. But you are losing blood and we do not have proper supplies. We need to get you somewhere safe." They rigged a travois behind one of the horses and laid Zachary on it, and the crew pushed hard south through the night and the next day, stopping only to rest the horses. Zachary drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain a constant roar in his head. He dreamed of Zara, of her face, of warm plates and gentle hands and a voice telling him to come back. He dreamed of the house he wanted to build, the land he wanted to own, the life he wanted to live. And he held on to those dreams like a rope thrown to a drowning man. They reached the Red River crossing and paid a ferryman to take them across, and then they were back in Texas, pushing south toward the ranch. It took 4 more days, and by the time they rode into the yard, Zachary was fevered and barely conscious. He heard voices, felt hands lifting him, and then there was softness beneath him and a cool cloth on his forehead and a familiar voice saying his name over and over. "Zara," he managed. "I am here. I am right here. You are home, Zachary. You are home and you are going to be fine." He forced his eyes open. Her face hovered above him, streaked with tears, and he thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. "Missed you," he whispered. "I missed you too, so much." "Now hush, you need to rest. The suppers." I saved you one every night, just like I promised." She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Every single night I kept your supper warm." He tried to smile, but the darkness pulled him down again. For 3 days, Zachary burned with fever while Zara tended him. She cleaned his wound, changed his bandages, spooned broth into him when he was coherent enough to swallow, and sat beside his bed through the long nights when he thrashed and moaned in delirium. Her father helped when he could, and James Johnston sent for a doctor from San Antonio, but it was Zara's stubborn care that pulled Zachary back from the edge. On the 4th day the fever broke, and he woke with a clear head for the first time since the shooting. She was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head pillowed on her folded arms on the mattress beside him. He reached out with his good hand and touched her hair, and she startled awake. "Zachary, I am all right," he said, his voice hoarse. "I think the fever broke." She pressed her hand to his forehead, then his cheek, and fresh tears spilled down her face. "Thank God, I was so afraid. When they brought you in on that travois with blood all over you, I thought I was going to lose you before I ever really had you. I am sorry. Do not apologize. Just get better." "I will." He laced his fingers through hers. "I promised I would come back, did I not? You did, and you kept your promise." She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. "Now you need to promise me something else. Anything. Promise me you will not get shot again." He managed a weak laugh. "I will do my best." Over the following weeks he healed slowly. Zara brought him meals in bed at first, and then helped him out to the porch where he could sit in the sun, and finally walked with him around the yard as he rebuilt his strength. The wound left a puckered scar on his shoulder, and his left arm ached when rain was coming, but he was alive and he was grateful. The other men brought him news from the ranch, stories about the cattle and the horses and the endless work. But Zachary found that he did not miss it the way he thought he would. He missed Zara when she was out of sight for more than an hour. One evening in late April, when the wildflowers were blooming across the prairie and the air smelled like rain, he asked her to walk with him down to the creek. They followed the path through the mesquite trees, not touching but close enough that their shoulders almost brushed, and when they reached the water he turned to her and took both her hands in his. "I need to say something, and I am not good at this, so just let me get through it," he began. "All right. These past 2 months, being hurt and having you take care of me, it made me realize something I think I already knew but was too scared to admit. I love you, Zara. I love you more than I have ever loved anything in my life. And I know I am just a cowboy with a scarred shoulder and not much money, and you deserve better, but I am going to work as hard as I can to build something good for us." Her eyes were shining. "For us, if you will have me." He took a breath. "I am asking you to marry me. I do not have a ring yet, and I cannot promise you an easy life, but I can promise that I will love you every day for the rest of my life, and I will always come home to you, and I will build you a house with a big kitchen window so you can watch for me when I am out on the range." She laughed, a bright, joyful sound, and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He held her carefully, mindful of his healing shoulder, and buried his face in her hair. "I was afraid you would say no. How could I say no? I have been in love with you since the first time you thanked me for saving your supper." She pulled back to look at him. "You looked so surprised, like nobody had ever done something kind for you before, and it broke my heart. I wanted to take care of you, Zachary. I wanted to show you that you mattered." "You did," he said roughly. "You showed me every single day." They were married in June by the circuit preacher who came through San Antonio once a month. It was a simple ceremony in the ranch house parlor, with Zara's father and the ranch hands as witnesses. Zara wore a dress of pale blue calico that she had sewn herself, and Zachary wore his one good shirt and his cleanest trousers. And when the preacher told him, He could kiss his bride. He did so with a tenderness that made Zara's father wipe his eyes. After the ceremony, there was a celebration with food and music, and the ranch hands danced with Zara one by one while Zachary watched from a chair, his shoulders still too weak for dancing but his heart full to bursting. Tom Ferris came and sat beside him. "You did it, Trent." "I did." "You are the luckiest man in Texas." "I know." James Johnston approached them, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "I have a proposition for you too," he said. "There is a section of land on the eastern edge of my property, about 600 acres, mostly good grass with a creek running through it. I am willing to sell it to you for $300 and you can pay me over time." Zachary stared at him. "Sir, that is too generous." "No, it is good business. You are one of my best men, Trent, and I do not want to lose you. If you own land next to mine, you will stay close, and I can hire you when I need an extra hand. Besides, your wife has been after me for months about giving you a chance. She is persuasive." Zachary looked across the room to where Zara was laughing with one of the ranch hand's wives, and his chest went tight with love. "She is that. So do we have a deal?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." They shook hands, and Zachary felt the shape of his future solidifying into something real. 600 acres. A creek. Room to build a house, run a small herd, grow something lasting. They spent the first month of their marriage living in a small cabin on the new property while Zachary and a crew of ranch hands built the house. It was hard work, made harder by his still healing shoulder, but every nail he drove felt like a promise kept. The house took shape slowly. A modest structure with 2 bedrooms, a front room, and a kitchen with a wide window that faced the road. That window was Zara's idea, and Zachary made sure it was positioned perfectly so she could stand at her work table and look out across the land to where the road bent around the hill. "So I can watch for you," she said when they installed it. "I am not planning on going far," he replied. "It does not matter. Whether you are gone for an hour or a day, I will watch for you, and when you come home, your supper will be waiting." They moved into the house in August. It was not finished yet, but the roof was sound and the walls were tight and there was a fireplace for cooking and heat. Zara made curtains for the windows and rugs for the floors, and Zachary built furniture with his own hands, each piece rough but sturdy. They were poor but happy, living on love and hope and hard work. Zachary bought a dozen head of cattle with the last of his savings and borrowed money from James Johnston for a dozen more. He worked the ranch during the day, hired out to neighbors when they needed help, and spent his evenings working on his own land, building fences and water tanks and shelters. Zara kept a garden and chickens, sold eggs in town, and hired herself out occasionally to cook for large gatherings or roundups. Money was tight, but they managed. More importantly, they were together. The first year of marriage taught them each other's rhythms. Zachary learned that Zara sang when she was happy and went quiet when she was worried, and that she liked wildflowers better than anything bought in a store. Zara learned that Zachary showed love through action rather than words, that he woke before dawn every morning without fail, and that his favorite meal was steak and beans and cornbread, the same meal she'd kept warm for him that first night. They learned to fight and make up, to compromise and support each other, to build a partnership that went deeper than romance. That fall, Zachary was hired to help with a cattle drive to a railhead in Fort Worth, a journey of only 2 weeks instead of 2 months. He almost turned it down, hating to leave Zara, but she insisted they needed the money. So he went, and for 2 weeks he rode hard and worked long hours and thought about his wife every minute. The other men on the drive ribbed him about being lovesick, but he did not care. When the drive was done and the cattle were sold, he rode for home faster than he'd ever ridden in his life, pushing his horse to the edge of endurance because he could not stand another minute away. He arrived home at sunset, and as he came over the hill and saw the house with lamplight glowing in the kitchen window, his heart lifted. He rode into the yard and swung down from his horse, and before he could even tie the reins, Zara was flying out the door and into his arms. "You are home early," she said against his chest. "I rode fast." "Why?" "Because I missed you." He kissed the top of her head. "And because I knew you would have supper waiting," she laughed. "I do. Come inside." The plate was on the table, warm and covered with a cloth, and beside it was a second plate for her. They sat together in their kitchen, in the house they had built, and ate the simple meal, and Zachary thought he had never been happier. After supper they sat on the porch and watched the stars come out, Zara tucked against his side, and they talked about the drive and the ranch and their plans for the future. "I want children," Zara said quietly. "Someday when we can afford it." "Me too." "How many?" "As many as you want to give me," she smiled. "That could be a lot." "I hope so." He kissed her temple. "I want a house full of noise and laughter. I want to give them everything I never had." "We will," she promised. "Together." The seasons turned. Winter came and went, and spring brought new calves and the hard work of branding. Summer was hot and dry, and they fought to keep their small herd watered. Fall brought cooler weather and the relief of rain. And through it all, Zara kept Zachary's supper warm on the nights when his work ran late, just as she had from the beginning. It became their ritual, their unspoken language of love. He would ride in exhausted and dusty, and there would be the plate waiting, and he would eat it, and she would sit with him, and they would talk about their day. It was ordinary, and it was everything. Their second year of marriage brought a pregnancy. Zara told him in March, her eyes shining with joy and fear, and Zachary felt his heart expand in his chest. He became even more protective of her, insisting she rest more and work less, hovering until she laughingly shooed him away. But he could not help it. The thought of becoming a father terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. Their son was born in November of 1880, a healthy boy with dark hair and his mother's eyes. They named him Silas, and Zachary held him with shaking hands and made silent promises to be the father he'd never had. Zara recovered quickly from the birth, and soon the house was filled with the sounds of a baby crying and cooing and learning to exist in the world. Zachary found that he loved fatherhood more than he'd expected, loved coming home to find Zara nursing their son or singing him to sleep, loved holding the small, warm weight of him against his chest. But parenthood was exhausting too, especially with a ranch to run and money always tight. There were nights when Zachary came in after dark to find Zara asleep in the rocking chair with Silas in her arms, both of them worn out, and his supper waiting cold on the table because she'd had no time to keep it warm. On those nights he would gently take the baby and put him in his cradle, wake Zara and guide her to bed, and then heat his own supper over the fire. He did not mind. It was part of the life they'd chosen, the life they were building together. When Silas was a year old, Zachary was offered a job helping drive a herd to Dodge City. The money was excellent, more than they'd make in 6 months of regular work, but it meant being gone for nearly 3 months. He almost said no, but Zara urged him to go. "We need the money," she said practically, "and I will be fine. My father is only 5 miles away, and the neighbors will help if I need anything. I hate leaving you and Silas, I know, but it is what we have to do sometimes." She cupped his face in her hands. "And you will come back. You always come back." So he went, and it was the hardest 3 months of his life. He missed Zara and Silas with a physical ache, missed the sound of his son's laughter and the feel of his wife in his arms. But he worked hard and rode harder, pushing himself and his horse to the limit on the return journey because he could not stand to be away from them another day. When he finally rode into the yard on an August evening, Silas was walking and Zara was visibly pregnant again, and the sight of them waiting on the porch for him brought tears to his eyes. "You are home," Zara said, and her voice shook. "I am home," he confirmed, and gathered them both into his arms. Their daughter was born in January of 1882, a tiny girl with blonde hair and her father's serious expression. They named her Beatrice, and Silas was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to touch her and help care for her. The house felt full now, crowded in the best possible way, and Zachary began to understand what it meant to build a legacy. This was what mattered, not the land or the cattle or the money, though all of those were important. What mattered was this family, these people he loved more than life itself. He made a decision. No more long drives. He would work their own land, hire out locally when needed, but he would not leave his family for months at a time anymore. Zara protested that they needed the money, but Zachary was firm. "We will make it work," he said. "I am not spending another season away from you and the children. Life is too short and they grow too fast." She kissed him. "I will not argue with that." The years rolled forward. Zachary added to their herd slowly but steadily, bought another section of land from James Johnston, built a proper barn and corrals. Zara expanded her garden and started selling vegetables in town along with her eggs and baked goods. Money was still tight, but less desperate than it had been. They were building something real, something lasting. Their third child, another daughter they named Bonnie, was born in 1884. And their fourth and final child, a son they named Nathan, arrived in 1886. 4 children, a thriving ranch, a solid marriage built on respect and love and the quiet language of care they'd developed over the years. Zachary was 32 years old, and he had everything he'd never dared to dream of. He still came home to a warm plate on the nights when his work ran late. Zara still saved his supper, still stood at that wide kitchen window watching for him to come over the hill. And he still rode faster those evenings, eager to be home, to see her face, to sit at their table surrounded by their children and eat the food she'd prepared with her own hands. It was their constant, their touchstone, the thing that connected them to the beginning of their love story. One evening in the spring of 1888, when Silas was 7 and learning to ride, Beatrice was 6 and helping her mother in the kitchen. Bonnie was 4 and into everything, and Nathan was 2 and discovering the world. Zachary came in from mending fence to find his family waiting for him. Zara had prepared a special meal, not just his plate but enough for all of them, and they sat together at the table they'd squeezed more chairs around as the family grew. "Papa, can I ride with you tomorrow?" Silas asked. "Maybe, if your mother says you have finished your chores." "I will finish them, I promise." Beatrice spoke up. "Mama is teaching me to make bread." "Is she? That is good. Your mama makes the best bread in Texas." Zara smiled at him across the table, and in her eyes he saw everything they'd been through together. The early days of quiet courtship, the plate kept warm on the windowsill, the terror of his injury and her nursing him back to health, the wedding and the building of this house and the births of their children. 10 years of marriage, of partnership, of love proven through showing up day after day. After supper, when the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Zachary and Zara sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars wheel overhead. "You remember the first time I kept your supper warm?" Zara asked. "Of course. October of 1878. I came back from a drive that had gone long, and there was a plate waiting on the windowsill. I thought I was dreaming. I was so nervous. I did not know if you would be angry or if you would think I was being too forward. I thought I was the luckiest man alive." He pulled her close. "I still do. I fell in love with you that season," she admitted. "Watching you work so hard, seeing how exhausted you were, knowing nobody was taking care of you, I wanted to be the one to take care of you. You have been, every day since, and you have taken care of me. Built me this house, gave me this family, loved me better than I ever imagined being loved." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through the grass. "Silas asked me something today," Zara said eventually. "He asked why I always keep your supper warm when you are going to be late. What did you tell him?" "I told him it is because I love you, and this is how I show it, that when you love someone, you do the things that make their life a little easier, a little better. Even small things like keeping a plate warm." Zachary felt his throat go tight. "That is a good lesson. He said he wants to do that for someone someday, keep their supper warm. He is a good boy. They are all good children. You are raising them well." "We are raising them well," she corrected. Together, the years continued their steady march. Zachary and Zara watched their children grow. Silas becoming a capable young man who loved the ranch work, Beatrice developing her mother's skill in the kitchen and her father's quiet strength, Bonnie full of energy and curiosity, Nathan following his older brother everywhere. The ranch prospered. They added more land, more cattle, hired hands to help with the work. Money was no longer a constant worry. They had built something secure, something that would outlast them. But the thing that remained constant through all the changes was the ritual of the warm plate. No matter how busy life became, no matter how many children needed tending or cattle needed moving or fences needed mending, Zara kept Zachary's supper warm on the nights when his work ran late. And Zachary rode home faster each time, eager to be there, to see her face, to taste the food she'd prepared for him. It was more than just a meal. It was a promise kept over and over, a testament to the love they'd built from small gestures and quiet care. One evening in 1894, when Silas was 13 and already taller than his mother, he came to Zachary in the barn. "Papa, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you know Mama was the one you wanted to marry?" Zachary set down the saddle he'd been repairing and gave his son his full attention. "Why do you ask?" Silas flushed. "There is a girl in town, Sarah Miller. She is nice and pretty and she smiles at me sometimes. You are a little young to be thinking about marriage. I know. But I just wondered." Zachary considered his answer carefully. "I knew your mother was the one because she took care of me when I did not ask her to. She saw that I needed something and she gave it without expecting anything in return. That is love, Silas. Not the big dramatic gestures, but the small constant kindnesses, the showing up every day, the keeping warm what needs to be kept warm." Silas nodded slowly. "Mama told me once that you rode faster every season just to get home to the supper she kept warm for you. That is true. I still do." "That is a good story." "It is a true story, and the best part is it did not end when we got married. It is still going. Your mother still keeps my supper warm and I still ride home as fast as I can to eat it. That is what marriage is, son. Finding someone whose presence makes you want to hurry home." The boy smiled. "I hope I find that someday. You will. And when you do, you treat her right. You show her every day that she matters. You ride home fast." "I will, Papa." By 1896, Silas was 15 and actively courting Sarah Miller, with her parents' permission and Zachary and Zara's blessing. The girl was kind and hardworking, the daughter of a shopkeeper in town, and she looked at Silas the way Zara had once looked at Zachary, like he hung the moon. Zachary approved. One Sunday Sarah came to dinner at their ranch, nervous and eager to make a good impression. Zara had prepared a feast, and the family gathered around the expanded table that now seated 8 comfortably. During the meal, Zachary watched his eldest son and the girl he was courting, saw the way Silas made sure Sarah had enough to eat, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he looked at her when he thought nobody was watching. And he saw his younger son sitting beside him, modeling the respect and care his parents had shown each other for nearly 20 years. After dinner, as Zara and the girls cleaned up and the younger children played outside, Zachary found Silas and Sarah on the porch. "Sarah, I want to show you something," he said. He led them to the kitchen window, the wide one that faced the road. "This window was the first thing I built in this house. I positioned it so my wife could stand here and watch for me when I was out on the range. And on the nights when my work ran late, she would keep my supper warm and set it right here on this sill, just like she used to do when we were courting." Sarah looked at the window with wonder. "That is so romantic." "It is practical," Zara said, coming to stand beside Zachary. "But yes, it is romantic too. It is about making sure the person you love knows you are thinking of them, caring for them, even when they are not there to see it." Silas slipped his hand into Sarah's and she blushed but did not pull away. "I want that," Silas said quietly. "I want what you and Papa have." "Then build it," Zachary said. "One day at a time, one small kindness at a time. Show up, keep your promises, ride home fast." Sarah looked up at Silas. "I would wait for you if you needed me to." "I know," Silas said, "and I would ride fast to get back to you." Zachary and Zara exchanged a look, recognizing their own story in their son's words. The legacy they'd built was not just the ranch or the land or the cattle. It was this: the understanding that love was something you did, something you chose every day, something you proved through action. Years passed. Silas married Sarah in 1898 when he was 17 and she was 16, and they built a small house on the northern edge of the ranch property. True to the lessons his parents had taught him, Silas made sure his house had a wide kitchen window facing the road. And on the nights when his work ran late, Sarah kept his supper warm on the windowsill, just as Zara had done for Zachary 20 years before. Zachary was 44 now, his dark hair threaded with silver, his body marked by years of hard work but still strong. Zara was 39, her beauty deepened by time and motherhood, her hands still as capable as they'd been when she'd first saved him a plate of food. Their younger children were growing up fast. Beatrice was 16 and catching the eye of several young men in town, though she showed no interest in settling down yet. Bonnie was 14 and loved horses more than anything. Nathan was 12 and already showing the same quiet strength his father had. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful in the region. They ran 500 head of cattle now, employed 4 full-time hands plus seasonal workers during busy times, and owned close to 2,000 acres of prime grazing land. Financially, they were comfortable, even prosperous. But the thing Zachary was proudest of was not the material success. It was the family they had built, the love that filled their home, the legacy of care and commitment they were passing to their children. One evening in the spring of 1900, Zachary rode in late from helping a neighbor with a difficult calving. He was tired and dirty, and as he came over the hill and saw his house with lamplight glowing in that wide kitchen window, his heart lifted the way it always did. 22 years of marriage, and he still got that flutter in his chest when he saw the house he'd built for her, the life they'd created together. He rode into the yard and dismounted, and before he could tie his horse, Zara was at the door, just as she'd been that first time he'd proposed to her, just as she'd been 1,000 times since. "You are late," she said, but she was smiling. "The calving took longer than expected. Sorry." Do not be sorry, I kept your supper warm. He climbed the porch steps and kissed her, his hands on her waist, breathing in the familiar scent of her. Have I told you lately that I love you? Not since this morning. Then I am overdue. I love you, Zara Trent. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. She blushed, even after all these years. You are getting sentimental in your old age. I am getting grateful. Every day I wake up and you are beside me, I am grateful. They went inside together, and there on the table was his plate, covered with a cloth and still warm. But tonight the table was fuller than usual. Silas and Sarah were there with their young son, 16-month-old Samuel, who had been born the previous winter. Beatrice was there with a young man Zachary did not recognize, a shopkeeper's son from town named David. Bonnie and Nathan were setting out plates and cups. It was a family gathering, impromptu and warm, and Zachary felt his heart swell. "What is all this?" he asked. "We wanted to celebrate," Zara said. 22 years ago today you asked me to marry you down by the creek." He had forgotten. "Has it been that long?" "It has. And I wanted all the children here to remember it, to see what we built together, to understand that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make over and over. It is keeping someone's supper warm when they work late. It is riding home fast because you cannot stand to be away. It is showing up every single day." Silas raised his cup. "To Mama and Papa, the best example of love I have ever seen." They all drank, even little Samuel, who had milk in his cup. And then they ate together, crowded around the table, talking and laughing and sharing the food Zara had prepared. Zachary looked around at his family, at the faces of his children and their partners and his grandchild, and he thought about that scared young cowboy who'd found a warm plate on a windowsill 22 years ago. That cowboy could never have imagined this life, this abundance, this joy. After dinner, Beatrice helped clean up while talking about David, the young man she'd brought home. "He is nice, Papa, respectful. He reminds me of you." "That is high praise," Zachary said. "It is the truth. I am not going to settle for anything less than what you and Mama have." "Good." "You should not." Later, when everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Zachary and Zara sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars were bright overhead, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked. "Marrying a cowboy with nothing but dreams? Never, not for a single moment. I have not given you an easy life. You have given me a good life, a full life, a life filled with love." She took his hand. "That is more than easy, that is everything." He kissed her knuckles. "I will keep riding home fast, you know, even when I am old and gray and my horse can barely manage more than a walk. And I will keep your supper warm, even when my hands shake too much to hold the plate steady." "We are going to grow old together," he said, and it was not a question but a statement of fact, a promise. "Yes," she agreed. "We are." The years turned again. Beatrice married David in 1902 and moved to town where he ran his family's mercantile. Bonnie married a rancher's son in 1904 and settled on a spread 50 miles west. Nathan was courting a girl from a neighboring ranch, serious and steady like his father. Silas and Sarah had 2 more children, and the big house echoed with grandchildren on Sundays when everyone gathered for dinner. Zachary was 50 in 1904, still strong but feeling his age more now, the old shoulder wound aching on cold mornings, his body stiff after long days in the saddle. But he worked on, because work was who he was, and because he loved the land and the cattle and the life he'd built. And every evening, no matter how late, he rode home to the house with the wide kitchen window, where his wife waited with his supper warm. One evening in the fall of that year, Zachary came in at sunset to find not just his own plate waiting but several more. The whole family had gathered. All his children and their spouses and his 5 grandchildren crowded into the house that suddenly felt too small for the love it contained. "What is this?" he asked. "A celebration," Silas said. 26 years ago today, you and Mama got married. And 50 years ago today, you were born," Zara added, smiling. "You did not think I would forget, did you?" He had forgotten his own birthday, too focused on the work and the land. But his family had remembered. They had a cake that Beatrice had made, decorated with wobbly icing letters that spelled out, "Happy Birthday, Papa." They had small gifts, practical things he needed like new work gloves and a knife sharpened by Silas. But the real gift was this: the gathering, the love, the proof that what he and Zara had built together had grown beyond them into something that would outlast their lives. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "All of you, thank you for being here, for being who you are. You are the best thing I ever did." "You and Mama together," Nathan corrected. "That is the best thing. The rest of us just happened because of it." They ate and celebrated, and Zachary thought about the journey that had brought him here. From a hard childhood, and a father who taught him nothing but violence, to a young cowboy wandering the range with nothing but his horse and his saddle, to the night he'd found a warm plate on a windowsill and everything changed. Zara had saved him, not just with her food but with her love, with her stubborn insistence that he mattered. And he had tried every day since to be worthy of that gift. Late that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Zara came to where Zachary sat on the porch steps, looking out at the dark land. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, settling beside him. "Everything. The long, strange road that brought me here. How easily I could have missed it all if I had not been assigned to that particular cattle drive, if old Miguel had not retired when he did, if you had not decided to keep my supper warm that first night. But I did keep it warm, and you came back, and we built this." She gestured at the house, the land, the life they shared. "I would ride through fire to get back to you," he said. "Every single time. I know, that is why I wait, that is why I will always wait." They sat together as the stars came out, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something that mattered. And in the kitchen, on the table, a single plate waited, covered with a cloth and kept warm by love. The final years rolled gently forward. Zachary and Zara grew old together, their hair going white, their bodies slowing but their love still strong. They watched their grandchildren grow, welcomed great-grandchildren, and saw the ranch pass into Silas's capable hands as Zachary finally, reluctantly, began to step back from the daily work. But one thing never changed. No matter how old they got, no matter how many years passed, Zara kept Zachary's supper warm on the nights when he wandered out to check the cattle, or mend a fence, or simply could not stop working. And Zachary rode home as fast as his aging body would allow, eager to see her face, to eat the food she'd prepared, to prove once again that love was not just a moment, but a lifetime of moments strung together like stars. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1929, the family gathered once more, grown now to include 4 children, their spouses, 13 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. The house they'd built so long ago had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing family, but that original kitchen with its wide window remained unchanged, a shrine to the love that had started everything. At the celebration, Silas stood to make a toast. 50 years ago, my father rode faster every season just to get home to the supper my mother kept warm for him. That dedication, that love, that commitment to showing up every single day has been the foundation of this family. Everything we are, everything we have, everything we will be, started with a warm plate on a windowsill and a cowboy who could not stay away. To Mama and Papa, may we all love as well as you have loved each other. Everyone raised their glasses, and Zachary looked at Zara across the crowded room, and in her eyes he saw everything they had been and everything they still were. 50 years of marriage, 50 years of keeping promises, 50 years of riding home fast. That evening, long after the guests had gone and the house was quiet, Zachary and Zara sat on their porch for the last time together, though they did not know it then. They held hands and watched the stars, and Zachary thought about how lucky he had been, how every good thing in his life had started with a woman who had cared enough to keep his supper warm. "I love you," he said, words that came easier now after 50 years of practice. "I love you too," she replied, "always have, always will. If I could live my life over, I would not change a single thing, except maybe I would tell you sooner how much you meant to me. You showed me every day, that was enough." They sat in peaceful silence as the night deepened. Two souls who had found each other and built a legacy of love that would ripple forward through generations. And in the kitchen, on the table, a plate waited, covered with a cloth and kept warm, a testament to the power of small constant kindnesses, and the cowboy who rode faster every season just to come home.